Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead, and I have with me today agricultural meteorologist Greg Soulje. We're going to take a longer term look at the weather here today, Greg.
Absolutely, Sarah. Nice to be with you here on a windy, milder, more typical feeling November day here across at least our part of the Corn Belt, northern Illinois. Like I just had mentioned outside a few minutes ago, to get into some mild air and some sunshine. Nothing better than a drip of snow melt off the gutter this afternoon across the area. So, yeah, nice one underway, and still more to come for the next few, at least in the short term. We'll take a look at that medium range, and the winter outlook is still available right here, and we'll have some discussion points about that going forward as we get together here in the next half hour.
Yeah, you're kind of going from winter back to spring here. I know you had about 10 inches of snow up in the north of Chicago here this week, and you're melting, and we're sitting in about 50 and going into 60-degree weather here, and just I don't know, 30 miles from you, 40 miles from you, or something like that. It's crazy, the variation.
Yeah, and that's a great example you bring up from these lake effect events when our friends in Michigan and northern Indiana, the lower lakes region, that's par for the course stuff, but those snows tend to be more uniform when they get going. It's kind of unusual. You can either have lake enhanced snow here in the Chicagoland area, northeast Illinois, with system snow and moisture off the lake, which the lake water temperatures are very warm, or pure lake effect. And we had a little low come down the lake, what we call a mesoscale low, that generated these bands of snow that made it all the way down to the Ohio River. And so there were folks that got 1 to 3 in some of the western suburbs. Up in my part of the world, near the Wisconsin line, 10.5. There were some 12 to 18-inch totals around Kenosha. And then at the south end of the lake as well, there's still some snow on the ground into parts of Iroquois, northern Iroquois, eastern Will, and Lake County, Indiana at the current time. So the variation typical of a lake effect. And even some reports where that happened at the height of it during, I believe it was Monday night, some thunder and lightning was reported in downtown Chicago. So quite the unusual event, not across necessarily growing areas, but a pretty cool event nonetheless if you follow weather.
Did you catch the Northern Lights last night? And I guess they're supposed to be even better tonight. Yeah. I think it is, right?
I get up stupid early, especially on TV days, which is going to be tomorrow, Thursday. So I got to remember, I have to go outside to see it. I don't think I can see it off the eastern window here. Yeah, actually, Dr. Jim Angel, the climatologist, State Water Survey climatologist emeritus, had some great pictures on social media. Our friend Dave Kessel up there in Will County as well. Some fantastic pictures from the stuff there as early as about 9:30, 10 o'clock last night. So I won't make it that late tonight staying up, but I'm up, like I said, stupid early. We'll try to get out there and take a look at it. Should be a good one for many areas of the Corn Belt and the Midwest for tonight.
I got some good views last night about 8 o'clock, just before 8. So maybe that's before your bedtime. And then I got up and went out about 5, and they were still going out there. So plenty of opportunity. Just point that camera up and take a look, I think, is the best way to do that. Well, let's not delay. Let's get into your forecast here. What's ahead, Greg?
Okay, well, just like we do on our Tuesday and Friday get-togethers, and of course on This Week in Agribusiness as well, we want to kind of start with small baby steps, especially on these digital outlooks and views, and then we build from there. And we certainly have the winter outlook here, and very little change from our mindset going here, but going forward. Anyway, the visible satellite picture from earlier this morning, very quiet weather pattern. You can see that finger of snow still lingering in the northeast Illinois, northwest Indiana, those little hatched areas, some usual fog in the valleys of California, Pacific West. They are in line. And it's interesting to see that the folks at the Climate Center have now put a webpage together to talk about exclusively atmospheric river setups. And they're in line for that, this time farther south into California. That atmospheric river system in the Pacific West will influence parts of the plains, livestock country, and the Corn Belt going forward here over the next 7 to 12 days. But the cloudiness and the snow showers and flurries and a more uniform lake effect that continues on into parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and into New York State. And here is what we call the upper air chart, the 500 millibar chart. It's the main steering currents that we talk about when we take a look at the upper configuration from a forecast standpoint. The X's are what we call vorticity maximums. I couldn't get that out of the frame for some reason, but it just designates little pockets of rising air, and hence you got the cloud cover where some of those X's are laid out from the upper lakes region into the northeast New England. But a pretty fast ribbon of air running from the Canadian Rockies down to the Ohio Valley into the northeast of New England, that U-shaped trough you can see there. Nice ridge over the southern plains and southwestern reaches of the country. Well, we have some phenomenal air. Sarah, I know you're a big Illinois fan, and if you want to check out the ball game down there Saturday at Champaign, they'll kick it off, I think, 2:30 in the afternoon. I don't remember who they're playing, maybe Maryland. Maybe off with that. But in any event, 70-degree weather expected. And some of that's already materializing on the southern plains. You can see where some of those winds come ashore into California, the Vanguard cloudiness, and that is the first of several significant weather systems that will bring significant rain and moisture and drought relief across California, the Southwest, ultimately moving into some of those southern plain states. Good news there with winter wheat, but some muddy feedlots expected to evolve here late in the weekend, early next week. There's a surface chart, little reinforcing boundary that has turned those winds from the gusty west-southwest direction that we had over parts of the Corn Belt yesterday into the west and northwest. But at least if you're in the sun and sheltered from the wind, feels pretty good. And that center of high pressure over across the plains, it'll be more through the Midwest going forward for the end part of the week. Under that, with sunshine, temperatures will easily push the 60-degree mark. We're seeing that over the western end of the state, and some 70-degree weather into the central plains currently this afternoon. So there's the Friday afternoon weather maps and charts. There's that little boundary racing to the Ohio Valley, some sprinkles and snowflakes for upper Michigan, some rain and snow to the northeast of New England. While it's been a pretty miserable setup out there, and we really don't sometimes talk about it, that's really a area that we should talk about come springtime with a lot of the maple syrup operations out there. I actually get emails from folks out there. You're not talking about the maple syrup and the weather and all that kind of stuff about it. So I actually needed to get a little education from our listeners and friends out there, TV-wise, into the northeast of New England, and how and when they get that all going out there. And you can see some moisture into the western states, including especially the coastal areas of California, Pacific Northwest. Quite high pressure builds across the plains into the western Corn Belt for tonight, into the Midwest on Thursday, and still that persistent west-northwest wind flow, those little X's or vortexes or disturbances bringing some rain and snow into the northeast of New England. And look at the swath of moisture. Now, we've had some in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California to a point where we've seen some significant drought relief, especially Northern California. Parts of the Willamette and Rogue River Basin will have the drought monitor coming up shortly, but that system is expected to dig, or what we call drop, south and southeastward, and envelop a good part of Central and Southern California with rain, very high elevation snow, maybe some thunderstorm activity, and that system is expected to open up, as we call it, sending several waves of shower activity into the plains. Some good coverage rains expected there to come, and a little more unsettled weather over the back end of the weekend, early next week across the Corn Belt locales. There's that big warm front out of Montana all the way down to Dixie and the southeastern states. We forgot to make mention of that. They've had a couple of mornings of frost. They were back down to the mid-30s this morning, as far south as Orlando, some upper 20s yesterday morning into the Florida Panhandle, and another frost as well into parts of much of the Carolinas and mid-Atlantic region out of that cold high. But the moisture cranking away in the Pacific West along the divide into the central valleys of California. It builds into the Imperial and San Joaquin valleys come Friday. With maybe a few sprinkles, inconsequential across the southern Corn Belt, although those areas south of I-70 have seen some significant drought improvement. A lot of work to do over the rest of the complex, and complaints on the other end of the spectrum, not from the maple syrup people, but from our radio pals in Central Illinois and Indiana. Bring on the rain. We're done. We're wrapped up. Things are parked for the season. The boots are ready. And livestock's ready to go to deal with the mud. And we need rain in some of these key drought areas, but that's just a few sprinkles into the Ohio Valley come Friday. Next, a couple of days, really right there, self-explanatory. Leftover snow shower and rain shower activity downwind of the Great Lakes region. Nothing going on across a good chunk of the Corn Belt. Back west out of the plains, you have to hit Yellowstone and westward to see some very high elevation snow. Otherwise, some shower activity. And look at the plume of moisture. This is a 48-hour forecast, 2-day forecast for rain into California and the Pacific West. But again, it is the start of the rainy season beginning. They kind of keep track of that stuff beginning October 1 and going forward. So time to get some moisture into California. And those systems, again, albeit in a weakened state, will make their way on eastward in the coming days. We are winding out of the tropical season. Officially ends on the 31st of November, 30th, 31st. I don't remember how many days in November. I should know that. In any event, it's coming to an end. Nothing going on in the next 7 days in the Atlantic Basin and the Pacific Basin on what has turned out to be probably a busted, at least Atlantic Basin forecast. I remember there was a talk of Armageddon and all that kind of stuff. We kept saying, the ridge is here, And so it goes. But that's good news. No need to have to worry about significant cleanup and recovery, at least as it applies to the United States. Of course, Melissa hitting the Caribbean islands a few days ago, and cleanup and recovery going on there. But sometimes those remnant tropical systems, while they bring excess rainfall, they are needed in the southeastern states of the mid-Atlantic region, where the drought monitor will take a look at. We've got some work to do down in that particular part of the country as well. And sometimes in these La Nina setups, it's not real great of a rain pattern for the southeast and deep south on a strengthening La Nina setup. We'll see how that plays out in our longer range weather maps and charts. There's that nice closed low Saturday in the left panel, closed, meaning it's cut off from the main steering currents. You can see that ribbon of fast green. We'll just call it green air for our edification here. It's just kind of the streamlines up aloft at about 25,000 feet out of the northern Pacific into western reaches of Canada. Downslope we go out of the Canadian and U.S. Rockies. The air compresses, it warms, and that's responsible for readings that'll be pushing 70 as far north of Champaign, maybe 80 south and southwest of the Ozarks on Saturday. Then, you see that ribbon of air, that fast ribbon of an air, little buckle moving through between Sunday and Monday. That will drag a couple of frontal boundaries across the Midwest and will bring temperatures down to more realistic levels. But that's still to a little above. That's still into the 50s. Nights barely to freezing, and it's still very comfortable outdoor work scenario. And some drying and firming if you actually need that to wrap it up for the season. And things stay quiet until we get into Monday and more likely Tuesday, Wednesday. You can see another trough. This one far more progressive and more open. And so that usually means a bigger weather system. Ahead of it, south-southwesterly winds up aloft by Tuesday, make that Wednesday, Thursday, and rain and shower activity. Bits and pieces, not coming all at once, will make their way across the plains into the Corn Belt locales. There's a little more of a surface orientation. One front whistling on by Saturday, markedly cooler, but more realistic for mid-November, Sunday into Monday. Then kind of a boundary sets up, little disturbances, lows, if you will, track along it. None of these are really impressive. They're a little ways up aloft. So we'll get spells and spurts of what will be some promising rain to start in the central and southern areas of the plains and kind of peter out as it makes its way at least into the early part of next week to the I-70 corridor, parts of the southern through eastern Corn Belt locales. I think getting into late next week and Thanksgiving week as well, getting a little more problematic, but it would be Thanksgiving week if we're not peddling at least some cold air moving into the northern reaches of the country, some snow issues there, and kind of a messy, rainy scenario for parts of the plains and Corn Belt if you wanted to advance thinking on Thanksgiving in the usual suspect areas, Nebraska Panhandle, Black Hills, Twin Cities, north of Lambeau. That particular corridor might be a little more colder and snowier up there towards Thanksgiving. Anyway, the next 7 days, look at the moisture through California, Las Vegas, out there towards Tahoe, down to Phoenix. A couple of thunderstorms thrown in for good measure. The rain amounts are significant in the Pacific Northwest. There'll be some very high elevation snows above probably 7,000 or 8,000 feet across the northern and central Rockies, and somewhat lowering snow levels in the mountains of the Southwest. But I think nothing to really greatly impact livestock operations, except for livestock operations in the valleys of California are going to get wet there, but that is certainly good news in the start of the rainy season there, where there again maybe some heavier downpours of rain, some potential for again some heavier rain and snow in the mountains of Arizona, and two significant areas of rain out of the southeastern plains and up the Ohio, one for the early part of the week, another one for the second half of the week. So additional promise, and it's been those areas that have seen significant moisture. Not ending of the drought, but a step or two in the right direction. But again, a lot of work to go into some of these areas from east central Illinois and points eastward all the way into the northeast of New England. So a quick look at high temperatures for this afternoon. That's 50s over the central Midwest Corn Belt areas to the west into the 60s and low 70s by the time you hit the Nebraska Panhandle. Cool air continues in the eastern states. That is a Saturday snapshot, heading towards the probably 70, 75 degree mark in the central Illinois, close to 70 as far north as Chicago, upper 60s and 70s over many areas of the Mississippi Valley and Midwest. No real cold air that cool off in the valleys of California and desert Southwest back into the 50s and 60s there, obviously, because of the rain and cloud cover. Then going forward into Monday, Tuesday next week, again, we have a couple of fast-moving frontal boundaries, cool fronts, much like these systems that have come through here the past couple of days. We've changed the wind direction around, we changed the air mass out a little bit, and that's kind of what we're looking at here going forward into the end part and of next week, with the daytime temperatures a little more realistic into the upper 30s and 40s, eastern Corn Belt, Mississippi Valley, 40s and 50s there, and another cooling pocket out west of the Missouri, and some chilly air for the time of year into Southern California, desert Southwest, with Phoenix maybe not getting out of the upper 60-degree range in the afternoon. Nighttime lows, again, maybe some frost areas down towards Mickey's Place and that I-4 corridor through central Florida and into the Panhandle areas. Look at lows by the time it gets to Saturday morning, well above freezing, into the upper 30s, 40s, and lower 50s. That's a comfortable start to the day and easy to take, I'm sure, with morning chores in mind. And no real cold air in sight going forward, with overnight readings into early next week still well above average, with nighttime lows back into the 40s and 50s for the Mississippi Valley, upper 30s and 40s across the Midwest, and a few 20s expected, mid to upper 20s as you get up near the Canadian border. Back into the drought monitor mode. This is the chart from late summertime, the 12th of August. And yeah, we were in relatively good shape. This drought and dry weather pattern really got going in the waning weeks of summertime and through much of the autumn season, hence an early and often start to harvest this year without much in the way of any real widespread issues with regard to harvest. I know there's market issues and financial issues and shipment issues and disease issues in some areas. But apart from that, August was not bad. Here we are from the monitor just late last week, and look at the corridors, the west and southwest, nothing unusual. We'll get some improvement there. Improvement through Northern California. We got some work to do out towards the Black Hills, Nebraska Panhandle, parts of the Corn Palace, Sioux Empire region, and really the worst of it, where we're getting complaints from out of Champaign County up towards Logansport, Indiana, Ball State, right around Warsaw, Indiana, and from there into the northeast of New England. But although those folks there have seen some significant moisture of late, a little more regional look. There it is through Champaign County, northeast and eastern Indiana, northwest Ohio, some drier areas in northern Wisconsin, and points south and southwest. And with time, we think we should be able to get some significant moisture in, even in those northern areas, before those grounds begin to lock up. So better propensity for some of these rain to snow, and it winds down and ends, or rain snow mix going over to snow and it ends. And we'll keep for now any major intrusion of Arctic air at bay. So hopefully there'll be some improvement in some of these northern reaches as well, not to mention across the Midwest. Out there towards Mount Washington, Bangor, Maine, down eastern Maine, lots of issues there going on. No tropical systems there, and the usual frontal boundaries that made it to try to make its way out of the Canadian prairie came to a screeching halt with that big, warm, hot ridge that's had much of the summertime season over the middle part of the country. And even there down through Florida, we've had actually remarkable improvement on just their rainy season this past summer and early autumn. The showers and thunderstorms that march in out of the Atlantic and the Gulf. And so just that setup alone improved things dramatically. And still dryness and drought story through the Florida Panhandle and southern Georgia. Again, absent afternoon thunderstorm activity. Atmosphere was way too warm. And the lack of any significant thank goodness, tropical systems or the remnants that made it into that part of the country. The drought outlook from the folks of the National Weather Service, and we would tend to kind of agree with this here, and that's why we kind of brought it up. Came out at the end of October, takes us out the next 3 months through the end of January, and that's a pretty good idea. I think I'd like to be a little more bullish on the moisture into the western parts of Illinois, Mississippi Valley, back in through Missouri, but the general right idea. Same with the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, some dryness and drought related increased issues going into late autumn and early winter across the deep south and southeastern parts of the country. And it'll be sort of a coin toss in the Southwest. That might be a little too bearish on some of the dryness and drought related issues. So they're thinking improvement Northwest, parts of the Corn Belt, and a little improvement, if not worsening, over the southern states. So on to the next 6 to 10 days, and pretty much in agreement with everything. I have no qualms on any of this stuff going forward. You can see two areas, really. The trough through the western states, that red hashed area in eastern Canada, that's a warm ridge. That's a blocking mechanism. Any Arctic air is locked down and stalled out for now across Alaska, western Alaska, then across in through eastern Siberia. We've had significant snowfall there early and often. Not much of the Canadian prairie. What's there will be melting away, same as applies to the northern and eastern areas of the Corn Belt, with the overall trough still across the southwestern reaches of the country. And that will be slowly moving with time. So the next 6 to 10 days, yeah, pretty easy to take weather pattern on man and beast, the back pocket with energy and outdoor work environments. A little cooler across the southwestern reaches of the country. As a result of cloud cover. And the general right idea here, maybe a little bit overdone, but the right idea of systems coming out of the southwest to the central and southern plains, a little better propensity for some moisture gain into the central and southern Corn Belt. And I'd like to be a little more bullish on the rainfall or moisture into the southern Great Lakes region. But the general right idea, it is the start, the vanguard. And like we've talked about on all these get-togethers, these are not ping pong balls in the atmosphere. It's a process of going from point A to point B to point C, or from C to B to A. It just doesn't happen overnight in the longer range spectrum on the maps and charts. And you can see by 2 weeks out, the general trough is the right idea over the southern states, that bending of the upper level wind pattern. There's still a blocking mechanism in that warm dashed area up towards Hudson Bay, James Bay, north of the St. Lawrence River Valley. No real cold air source except for western Alaska into Siberia and that particular part of the hemisphere. And that's it. There is some hatching warm, at least hatched areas in the northern and central Pacific. And I would think that that's probably the signature that downstream, or in our direction, as we call the weather business, will begin to turn those winds more with time in from the north and northwest, and what we call a separate northern branch of the jet. Bottom line, colder air probably beginning to make its presence felt up near the Canadian border, the far northern tier of states, but that's probably into the early days or first week of the month of December. Going forward the next 2 weeks, yeah, easy to take out there. Some cooling, and that's not Arctic air. That's just cloud cover across Southern California and the desert Southwest. Moisture, that's kind of the right idea. That's more like it. And with time, I think we'll just sort of see that bigger green moisture-laden area relative to late November, continuing to slowly propagate its way to the north and northeast. So things are kind of working out nicely, like we have been laying out here going forward, Sarah, for the since we've been getting together here. A nice summertime season, relatively speaking, a fast harvest. Of course, we had some dryness, drought issues late in the season, the rust issues as well. But going forward here, pretty easy weather pattern, and we'll kind of take a quick wrap on the rest of autumn around here before we get into the winter outlook.
Well, let's remind folks here real quickly, too, if they have any questions, we have the weather guy live with us. So post those there in the chat. Or if you're joining us from social media, put those in your social media feed, and we'll get those over to Greg, and he can let you know what he's thinking on that. So Greg, what else? We might even
give you a plug on this. We might even give you a plug in this broadcast and on TV as well.
There we go. And as you said yesterday, or Tuesday, you can take special requests for weather, right? And make it happen.
We do. We're kind of selective once in a while, but don't get me going on global warming and all that kind of stuff. I get that anytime I go on a speaking gig, and there are not many of them. I seem to be tied to the weather office here more than I'd like to be. But in any event, I just don't want to get into that. You know, weather is cyclical. It's been changing since mankind's been around, when we don't have the data that goes back that far to prove it, but it is what it is. So anyway, that's my commentary.
Well, keep going on autumn here. Let's see what the rest of it holds.
Yeah, and it's really just the rest of November, the next couple of weeks. And yeah, there's some cooler air on the move. Again, we're a little more bullish in our thinking, getting some of this chillier air in, but nothing terribly cold. The source begins to make its way in the usual suspect areas of western and central Canada. We're into a neutral state atmosphere, we think. I know folks have been talking about we're already into a La Nina, but I think we're just beginning to get into it now. And so for the rest of the month of November here, the next couple of weeks, temps will vary from this phenomenally warm setup to readings that'll be closer to seasonal norms, to spikes of temperature. That's pretty much the story from Southern California across the western and northern Corn Belt. Still some warm weather holding on down through Dixie. And again, the beginning stages of somewhat chillier, not necessarily Arctic air, but readings a little bit below average in the northern part of the country, and still below average with the moisture systems moving in to the Pacific West. So there'll be a little better propensity to maybe get into layout, especially in the waning couple of days, the back end of the Thanksgiving holiday and 1st of December. That kind of gets me a little bit nervous once in a while. So there may be a little band of snow breaking out there. And some rain, or at least snow over to rain before it shifts back over to snow, but no major winter storms on any of these weather systems. And this is not just a continuation and everyday occurrence. These systems will move on through, may take a couple of days to get them through, another day or two of downtime and back into the next weather system. But generally speaking, some significant moisture in areas where we need it, into the lower Mississippi Valley. At least it's a return of normal moisture down through Dixie, parts of Texas, and across the rest of the Corn Belt, and some significant moisture too into the Pacific West. So going forward from there, we'll take a look at the winter outlook, and not much in the way of any substantial change. We are maybe bringing some of that cold air in a little more dominant, but parking it into the northern reaches of the country, and then a quick slide to the east and southeast. We think there's going to be two lobes of Arctic air, cold air, based on what we call the stratospheric temperature structure. You got the troposphere, that's the main layer of the atmosphere that drives weather systems. Well, above it, there's another layer. We keep track of temperatures, especially the polar region. So I think we're going to dislodge a piece, but it's just going to slide over and move out that warm bubble that we've had over the eastern part of the Canadian prairie. And so a quick shot as we move into early December like this. And this will be sort of the recurring phenomena of systems that move out of Canada. They run the periphery of the Arctic air. They move into the mid-Atlantic region, and much of December trends a little bit colder than average over the northern and eastern Corn Belt. Now, compared to the warmth that we had, that will bring a shock to the system for man and beast. Not real pure Arctic air, but a colder, damper go of it, if you will. So from this range of well above to a bit below going into December, keep an eye on that as the warm air kind of temporarily retrogrades back across the southwestern and western reaches of the country. A little better propensity for these mixed systems that start as snow, go to rain, back over to snow. These will tend to be fast-moving features. They may be a little more frequent in nature compared to what we've seen here for the month of November. But again, moisture, and without any super cold air, at least thaw-free cycles, we anticipate even through some of these northern dry areas to get some moisture to percolate on in. And so it goes. A good weather pattern, if you will, from drought relief for the Pacific Northwest, both these snow and rain systems back and forth. Don't think it's going to be a month of big weather headlines, although it seems like any flake of snow or drop in temperature below freezing, you're off to the races with headlines for some reason or another. But kind of a more normalized December feel. It will be in contrast to the warm weather that we've had much of the fall season. So be ready for that. These key livestock areas, though, are going to be in pretty good shape with ongoing warmth, even into the start of the new year and much of January into Oklahoma and Texas. Not that we won't get some spells and spikes of cold air, but it's a very fast current of air. There's not much snow cover. We've got to start adding to it in December, as you saw. And so the cold air begins to reestablish itself on probably a second warming of the stratosphere, dislodging a piece of cold, but the jet stream current's still strong. So we still get this layout of somewhat colder than average weather to the north, fairly benign. Warmth continues down south, but anytime you get these compaction and ranges of temperatures, it's a pretty busy weather pattern. Stormy would be a good way to call it, particularly as it applies to the northern plains, the upper lakes region, some good winder uppers. But when those tend to move through, you also get better windows of opportunity for movement of feed and supplies, getting caught up on outdoor work if you have that, et cetera, so forth and so on. So this is the story for January, getting into more or less as you would expect for January. Nothing terribly cold, nothing terribly warm over the middle part of the country. That's the warmer stuff down south, and any semblance of colder air, again, nominal in nature, up near the Canadian border. But some pretty good systems will be marching on through. But what do you expect for January? Now, going into February, this remains pretty much locked in. There's probably some better guidance, at least in the weather office here, for February in dislodging the last of these cold air surges, the secondary piece that will begin to build southward. And I think it's this cold that oscillates back and forth, maybe not the severity of it, but some areas from the northern plains into the Great Lakes areas, northern and eastern Corn Belt, and back the other way. Anytime you get these cold air surges in here, you tend to not only come up with a stormy February on the maps and charts around here with this strengthening moderate La Nina. Look how far south the jet stream pattern then goes. And it's a classic setup for February as well. We get moisture and plenty of it, and severe weather potential down across the southern and southeastern states. And that cold air, Sarah, I think as we go forward, is something that will have to be watched into the springtime season over the Great Lakes areas, northern and eastern Corn Belt. Don't think it's going to really go away in a hurry. And sometimes when those things lock in, the favored storm track is out of the southern and eastern plains, southern through eastern Corn Belt into the Lakes region. Hence, if you're thinking you want to get an early start, Well, I don't think that's going to happen. We also have opportunities going forward. You may not like the form it comes down in, but for drought relief as well coming into the springtime season. We tried to get the moisture going, before the winter season got going in earnest, and as we move into January and February. But if we don't get it done, then we'll get it done over the winter time season. So that is a check on things around here, the winter outlook going forward, and hopefully this will help one and all out there with planning and figuring it out going forward here in the weeks to come.
Very good. And of course, you can catch Greg every week, a couple times a week here on Feedstuffs 365 for quick updates. And then every weekend on This Week in Agribusiness and a number of radio stations across the country every day, I believe. Right, Greg? You're out there everywhere.
Yeah, whether you like it or not, I turn up on somebody's dial. I learn new each and every day where I'm turning up. And some local stations too out of Champaign, Illinois, Danville, and hopefully going to talk with some folks outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Hopefully get on the radio over there in the coming weeks. So we've got you right across the heart of the Corn Belt at least, and of course nationally as well, and as on those other platforms you pointed out as well. Always a pleasure to get together with you, Sarah, on these longer range forecasts.
And thank you so much, Greg, for all of your insight and for sharing that with you. And we appreciate all of you in our audience tuning in as well. For more information and news of those topics of interest to animal agriculture, be sure to check out our interviews here on feedstuffs.com. Until next time, for Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.